So in this video, I'm going to show you how to configure an IPv4 floating static route. We've already discussed static routes and default routes. This, as the name suggests, is another type of static route. And floating static routes are most often used to configure a backup route or a backup path to a destination. So what would happen is you'd have a primary static route, and that's got a default administrative distance of 1. So even if you had an OSPF or EIGRP route, the static route would be installed in the routing table since it has a lower administrative distance. I've got a layer 3 topology with a branch office, and it's got connections to two different ISPs, ISP1 and ISP2. So the primary preferred path is ISP1, and this is shown with the primary route here. So if the link between branch 1 and ISP1 goes down, then what I would do is configure a floating static route. Then with a floating static route configured, I could forward the traffic from branch 1 to ISP2. Then ISP1 and ISP2 would have their own routing to forward the packets between those routers. I've also got this host on 172.16.1, and I've got this destination, this server on 172.16.3. This could be a server in the cloud or a data center server. If interface FA00 on branch 1 goes down, then what would happen is the floating static route would be installed into the routing table. And that's accomplished by assigning a higher administrative distance to the floating static route. So as long as the primary static route is in the routing table, then the floating static route would not be active. But as soon as that interface FA00 goes down, for example, then the primary static route would be dropped from the routing table and the floating static route would be installed. So we'll go to branch 1. First, I'll take a look at the routing table. What I've got here is just connected routes and a static route. This is the primary static route, and it's to get to 172.16.3.0, take 192.168.1.2. So I'll show you the static route. There it is there. So the destination route is 172.16.3. That's the subnet for server 1. To do that, I'll take next hop 192.168.1.2. And that's FA00 on ISP1. So you see it there. So there's the next hop. So the next hop is ISP1. So now I'll configure a floating static route. And it'll be similar to the primary. And the server network address is a /24. And the next hop address is going to be 192.168.3.2. That's FA20 on ISP2. So there it is, 192.168.3.2. It's FA20. I have to assign an administrative distance higher than 1. And I do that so it's not installed in the routing table. So as long as it's a higher administrative distance than a default static route, then it won't be installed in the routing table. Since the primary static route has an administrative distance of 1, so that'll be preferred. This will be a floating static route. That's all there is to that. Look at the routing table again. So you notice that the primary is still in there, going to 192.168.1.2. So nothing has changed. 192.168.1.2. So that's working as expected. That's what the primary route is, or the static route. Now we'll verify connectivity and path forwarding from host 1 to server 1. I got 2 replies. I'll send the ping again, and this time I got all 4 replies. So there is a layer 3 connectivity. I'll do a trace route. And I've got 3 hops. So the first one is 172.16.1.2. That's interface FA10 on branch 1. That's the default gateway for host 1. And the next hop is 192.168.1.2. And that is FA00 on ISP1. And there it is there. And third hop is the destination. I'm going to turn off this interface FA00 on branch 1. And that will install the floating static route into the routing table of branch 1. Drop the primary static route. So let's do a shut there. I'll just verify it's shut. You see up top there FA00 192.168.1.1. That is administratively down. So the interface is shut. So with that, the floating static route that had a higher administrative distance will now be installed in the routing table. Now I want to verify the floating static route has been installed in the routing table of branch 1. So I'll do show IP route. And there it is there, static route. Get to 172.16.3.0. Take next hop 192.168.3.2. Notice the administrative distance is 2. The default for a static route is 1. So now it's been installed. The primary static route has been dropped from the routing table. There's 192.168.3.2. So I'll verify this now with ping and trace route. The traffic is taking this backup path by ISP2 to get to server 1. We'll just do a ping again. So I'll send it again. I'm getting replies, so that's good. Now I'll just do a trace route. Notice here, top one is the default gateway, 172.16.1.2. Then the next hop is 192.168.3.2. That's the floating static route. Then 192.168.2.1 and 172.16.3.1. The 192.168.2.1, that would be this one here, FA10. 192.168.2.1. So the backup route is working. It's sending packets to ISP2. So the floating static route is working correctly. The other thing to consider with floating static route is if you set the administrative distance too high, like 200 for example, what could happen is if you have a dynamic route, such as say OSPF, that has administrative distance of 110, that would be installed instead of the floating static route, since it has a lower administrative distance. So that verifies the floating static route is working, and that concludes the video.